Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build NFL Edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith, and we are getting ready to go over the Week 10 main slate for NFL DFS at DraftKings. Hopefully, we can help you win some money. If you like free advice, that's what we're giving you. Please hammer the like button on this video, and also consider subscribing to the channel. We push out videos like this for every NFL slate that we can. We already did one for Thursday Night Football, hit some really nice picks with Jamar Chase and the captain. And I also pushed out some one for the Munich game, and also one for Sunday Night Football this week too. And we cover NBA every day that we can, except for the weekends, I suppose. But we have an NBA main slate video out for today too. So lots to go over here for the main slate. Week 10 NFL DFS at DraftKings. We're going to go position by position, trying to point you to the guys we like the most, factoring in player projection, ownership, and matchups. All right, Taylor, up top with the best projection of the slate is Josh Allen. He gets the Colts. It is a pretty good matchup. And then right there with him, almost the same price, almost the same projection, is Jalen Hurts, also a pretty palatable matchup against Dallas. Also, just throw in Jaden Daniels with him, too, because he's not too far behind them in projection or price. So looking at those three guys up top, do you have any interest in spending big money at quarterback this week?
Doesn't look like it. Not really getting... As of now, it's Friday afternoon, but as of now, I'm not really getting too much Allen or Hurts. I think they're fine prices, both under 8K, and the matchups are good, like you said, but there is a lot of cheap stuff at QB this week that looks good as well. The one expensive guy I do have presumably over the field is Jaden Daniels, 7,500. Matchup stinks, but, I could see him being the lowest down of those QBs. Ownership right now is pretty flat, but see how it turns out. I just can't imagine that many people are going to want to pick on Pittsburgh, especially with a rookie QB. So I don't mind Daniels either by himself or in a skinny stack, but I won't be like fully stacking Washington.
Yeah, I think I'm probably right there with you as far as I don't really know if we have to pay up at quarterback. There's quite a few nice mid-range guys to get excited about, and I'm sure we're going to be in agreement there. But these guys are not going to be owned. So I definitely have interest in Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts just based off of ownership and raw points. I mean, these guys are coming in with 23-point fantasy point projection, and they're not going to be very owned. So that is interesting. I think of those three guys up there, Hurts would be the play, 29-plus fantasy points in each of his last two games, and Dallas is not a defense to fear. Obviously, a huge game for the Cowboys, but they were without Dak Prescott too, so it only plays more into the Eagles probably getting added opportunities. Anyways, I don't think I'm going to pay up at quarterback a lot, but if I did, it's probably going to be Jalen Hurts. Now, having said that, we touched on mid-range. You have Kyler Murray at 6.3K. You have Brock Purdy at 6.5. You have Sam Darnold at 6.2. There are other guys there too, but those are probably the three guys that stand out the most. Purdy actually has the fourth best projection of the slate. Sam Darnold comes in at 6. Just staying in like that 6K range. How do you feel about those guys? And are there any other guys in the 6K range that you like?
Quite a few. That's pretty much where I'm landing with everybody this week. My highest owned QB right now is Brock Purdy. That may shock you because I am on Brock Purdy every week. It seems that
it does not
exposed QB, but facing Tampa Bay on the road. Tampa Bay's defense not good this season. They've been gashed by Kirk Cousins on multiple occasions. There's a bit disappointing, but they are getting healthier. I think McCaffrey's back this week. In theory, that should help Purdy a little bit. 6,500, just a perfectly fine price for him. But I do like Darnold against Jacksonville. We've seen the Jaguars get gashed every week. I don't think they're in the Dome. I think they're in Jacksonville. Could be wrong on that, but
they are.
Either way, Darnold has glorious weapons. We know the deal with him. Russell Wilson, I think, is pretty interesting at 5'9" against Washington. He's been good in the 2 games since he took over. Washington's defense has been better than expected, but still not fully sold. That's a matchup we have to avoid. I guess you can make a case for Mayfield. You can make a case for Mahomes against Denver, but not super psyched about that. I think one of the better QBs on the slate is Aaron Rodgers for 5,700 going into the Dome to face Arizona. The Cardinals, still among the worst defenses in the NFL. Don't trust the Jets and their old-ass weapons, but he does have Garrett Wilson, which helps, and Rodgers himself is not super expensive. So I am back on the bandwagon with him this week, I think.
Well, Taylor, we are aligned. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to get away from these guys. Rodgers looks awesome at 5.7K. I think just for a little bit more, I'd rather just go with the safety and reliability of somebody like Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy. Purdy is my number one quarterback play of the week. If you need a flag plant at quarterback, it is Purdy. Getting Christian McCaffrey back is massive for him. Obviously, you have the dump off potential. You just have the fact that defenses have to respect the running game again. I feel like that kind of wavered a bit when it was just Jordan Mason back there. He's just not the same dynamic threat that McCaffrey is. So, you don't know what they're going to do with C back there, and that just opens things up for Purdy. Obviously, they don't have Brandon Ayuk, but otherwise they are at full strength now. Purdy does have Debo and Kittle to work with. I love Purdy. The Buccaneers are second worst against fantasy quarterbacks, and to the point you made with Darnold, Jaguars are dead last. So you can save the 300 and go with Darnold. I think ownership, like you said, looks pretty split across the board. So I just am not going to worry that much about it. I think Purdy is the best play at quarterback. Darnold is not that far behind. And if you do want to save and get under 6K, there's not a lot of punts that I feel comfortable with, but the one that I would feel comfortable with is going to be Rodgers too. So we are very much aligned across the board at quarterback. So it's a pretty fun position, to be honest. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you can entertain the idea of Caleb Williams at 5.6. He looks like a viable pivot off of Rodgers, who is going to carry a little bit of ownership. But carrying ownership seems like such a silly thing to say when nobody's coming in at more than 10% right now. So I am just not going to mess around too much. It's going to be a tight player pool. I might target Jalen Hurts a little bit, and then it's mostly going to be Darnold and Purdy for me.
I would play Justin Herbert as well. 5,200 semi-indoor game at SoFi against the Titans. Just not the most imposing matchup. They have been a little more pass-heavy the last few weeks. It's a cheap stack. McConkey's not expensive. QJ's not expensive. You can target the tight ends. So I think Justin Herbert and Chargers stacks are pretty interesting this week.
Yeah, he's actually been pretty good lately, I think. Let's see.
Yep.
Yeah, 17 plus fantasy points in each of his last 3 games. He had a 24-point fantasy outing 2 games ago, 19 last week. So he's been feeling it, and his offense is getting healthier because Quentin Johnson came back last week and had 2 touchdowns. So I don't hate it. The Titans are not a fun matchup, but they actually got gashed by the Lions a couple weeks ago. So perhaps their defense is starting to regress. I mean, when you don't have a good offense, people do tend to ignore that fact that, yes, you can have a good defense, but if your offense doesn't put you in favorable positions, it can struggle. So I like that call quite a bit. 5.2 is just way too cheap for what Herbert can do. Moving over to running back, Alvin Kamara is massive chalk. I don't know if this is going to hold, but I guess it makes sense. He's coming off of a pretty big outing last week. I think he had 30 fantasy points.
No touchdowns.
With no touchdowns. That's nuts. So, I mean, he did face the Panthers, but I mean, he's been pretty steady overall, 17 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. But that was his first 20 plus point fantasy outing since week 4. So I don't know. Could the wheels be coming off? Dennis Allen just got fired. That is certainly a good thing, I think, for the Saints. But at the same time, they just seem like a dumpster fire at 2-7. This feels like chalk to get away from, in my opinion. The Falcons are a good friendly matchup for DFS purposes. This game, I feel like it has a good total. Yeah, 46. That's solid. I don't hate Kamara, but I do not like his ownership. I think his projection is a little egregious. How are you feeling about him to start things off?
The way he projects, hard to put him at the moment. So I don't think he's a bad play or anything, but it is obviously a deep position. A lot could go wrong. These chalk running backs kind of have a way of just flatlining. But at this point, I'm probably going to play a lot of them. We'll see how it goes on Sunday morning. But I think he's a great play. I think this is kind of a position where you can't really punt it this week. There's really nothing on the super cheap end that's going to stand out as of now. So paying looks like the way to go. I'm pretty much exclusively playing people who are 6K or above. Kamara, Aaron Jones for Minnesota looks good to me. DeAndre Swift in that Bears game against New England. Saquon and JT are fine pay-up options too. You can always make a case for Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, but yeah, Bijan, obviously I should mention Bijan. There's a ton to like at the high end with running backs. I don't think you can mess around with any cheap stuff there.
No, there's a lot of good plays. I think you do have to pay at running back this week, which is going to be kind of tough to also get, a really expensive quarterback and a stud wide receiver. So, which is why I don't really want to go after Hurts and the collective of 7K and above. As far as stud running backs go, Saquon always feels good, and the matchup with Dallas is good. The bottom 4 defense against fantasy running backs, but his projection for his price is not where I would want it to be. I just think naturally I'm going to go away from the Kamara ownership. I just feel that the projection is just like presumptuous. I mean, I don't know. I don't love it. I'm not saying he's a bad play. It just feels off to me. So I think Bijan looks good. Breece Hall is probably my favorite play overall. 7.6 against the Cardinals, who are a bottom 6 defense against the run for fantasy purposes. I like the Aaron Jones call. Not sure I really trust any Cardinals against the Jets. I do tend to think the Jets are kind of going to be on an upward swing here and get going with some positive momentum after last week. They look good in the second half, man, and they've shut down CJ Stroud. That was impressive. So
Everyone
I think
shut down the Texans, so no big deal.
Well, Texans are capable. Anyways, I like the Aaron Jones call against the Jaguars. They're very bad. Third worst against fantasy running backs. JT is maybe kind of sneaky here because he's only 7.5K. He's like the cheapest guy of the top 5 guys in terms of raw points projection, and he's the lowest owned, and he faces a Bills defense that ranks second to last against fantasy running backs. So if you want to go against the grain a little bit, but not really sacrifice, production and potential, Jonathan Taylor is very, very interesting to me on this slate. If we want to go more in the mid-range, you kind of were talking about the 6K range. You mentioned Aaron Jones. Did you mention Kareem Hunt? Because he seems a little bit interesting against Denver just because people are going to avoid the Broncos like the plague anyways. It's because they had been very good defensively before getting just destroyed by the Ravens. But Kareem Hunt's role is massive. He gets like 20 plus carries every week, and he falls into the end zone almost every game too. So at 6.6K, he is a mild source of savings with a pretty awesome role. I think that's probably about it. I really think this is a spot where we kind of have to pay up at running back at least at one spot. And I'm pretty comfortable doing it in 2. Are there any values or punts that you're like excited about? Or are we aligned there? We're just probably paying at both running back positions.
There's really no one under 6K I think is trustworthy. Like in the 6K range, you can play like Najee Harris, I think is okay. Rico Dowdle, maybe, but even that feels pretty thin. So not really going to intentionally pay below like 6,500 at running back, it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, all these 6 to 6.6K guys look okay. Najee, Stevenson, Swift, Rico, they're fine. I just don't think they really offer the ceiling you're going to need, and a lot of them have pretty rough matchups as well. So, I mean, my first run through had Bijan and Breece together. So I feel like 7.6 and 7.7, you're saving a little bit of money compared to Kamara and Saquon. Oh, and one last thing I'll say, I'm completely out on McCaffrey in his first game back. We have no idea what that's going to look like. Obviously, the matchup is really nice, and he's a stud, but I don't think I can do that after missing like 9 weeks of football.
Probably not a good play, but I think you can take a shot on it in like a super lottery tournament and just, maybe he gets 3 touchdowns and maybe he just totally breaks the slate. Who knows?
That's true, because he also is heavily discounted for who he can be. Usually he's like 10K and he's only 8K. So it's just obviously the expectation is for him to not have a really big game, and you just never know. All right, over to wide receiver go. Justin Jefferson leads the way with a 21-point fantasy projection. If you like Sam Darnold, you surely like Justin Jefferson, and as do I. Both Jets receivers are correlating nicely as far as projection goes with Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson is just ahead of Devontae Adams, but they both look like awesome plays at 7.2 and 7K. And then rounding out the top 4 projecting wide receivers would be CeeDee Lamb at 8.6. So I'm okay with the Jets in particular if you're going to stack Rodgers, but if you want to just play one of them, they both look good. I think I would lean Garrett just because he's more explosive. Love Justin Jefferson, whether you play Darnold or not, but of course stacking them together makes sense. And then I am out on CD. He's got a bum shoulder and he does not have Dak. So that's where I stand there. How you feel about these first 4 guys?
Yeah, Lamb is a pretty easy fade, I think, on this slate. I mean, he's capable. It's not like Cooper Rush is horrible, but I'm just not really looking to do that. I just don't think you need to do that on a huge slate, especially with the way Justin Jefferson looks, the way Garrett Wilson looks among the high-end wide receivers. I think those are kind of clearly the top two guys. I mentioned liking Jaden Daniels, so I do like Terry McLaurin a little bit along with him. That's really it. Like Jefferson, I'm getting a ton of, and he's super pricey. So that's kind of the stand I'm taking with most receivers or among the receivers. And then there's cheaper stuff that looks pretty good too.
Okay, so yeah, I think I mean, I will say CD coming at like 7% ownership. That is interesting. As far as an ownership play in GPPs, he's in play, like as a pivot to Jefferson and getting like half the ownership or something. But like you said, it's such a big slate. I don't think you have to get cute as far as ownership plays. If it makes sense, go for it. But I don't think like McCaffrey and CD make sense to me on this slate. Leading into the value plays, Josh Downs is coming up with one of the better projections, and he's only 6.2K. Drake London is not that far behind him. He's only $500 more. And they have Khalil Shakir also projecting well at only 6K flat. So any interest in those three guys, or are you looking to go down even further?
Yeah, Downs is my highest owned or highest exposed receiver on the slate. I just think without Michael Pittman, very obvious spot. More trustworthy with Flacco in there, even if Flacco looked like shit last week. I'm still fine with Josh Downs. I have London a little bit. Who is he? Oh, Shakir. Yeah, he looks okay, but doesn't look like a major priority to me. I think I didn't mention him among the expensive guys. He's only 6'9", but Debo, just naturally playing him with Purdy along with Juwan Jennings with Brandon Ayuk out. Jennings is 5,100. I think he's an awesome value on the slate. Similarly, Ricky Pearsall for 4.4. Like if you want to go all in with the stack, I think is fine. And then Lad McConkey, I mentioned liking Herbert quite a bit. McConkey for 5.9 is kind of a core play in those stacks.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, Debo at 6.9 looks really, really good. It is tough to commit to Pearsall with Debo and Jennings both in. Love the Jennings call at 5.1K. I think Pearsall is in play, but I would definitely trust Jennings more. And I really want to get to Debo at 6.9.
Jennings is definitely the better play, but I think you can have Pearsall in your pool.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. The other guy I wanted to mention. So speaking of the Colts thing, if Downs is going to carry that much ownership, Downs is a good play, no doubt about it. But if he's going to carry that much ownership, I do not have an issue with kind of leveraging that with Alec Pierce at 4.3K or even Adonai Mitchell at 3.4K. I mean, no Michael Pittman, so those guys are going to play more. I think Pierce is a little bit safer, and he does have a ceiling, but Adonai Mitchell saves you like $900, and he's going to be out there quite a bit. So those guys are pretty interesting. I don't know if you want to go stack them with Joe Flacco. I don't think you need to. I just think you can leverage the ownership and save a lot of money with one of those guys right away. DeAndre Hopkins at 5.3K. Not a really good matchup, but he's went off last week, and he obviously has a pretty big role in an improving offense in KC. Marvin Harrison Jr. also not a good matchup, but he has proven to be a stud. He just has spike weeks. Like 1 week he'll get you 2, the next week he'll get you 30. You just never know. So I think in tournaments he's going to be completely overlooked. He's a little bit interesting. And one more guy that I like, not really cheap, but very interesting if he indeed plays. He's been questionable. Brian Thomas Jr. has proven to be a big play threat. He does not have Trevor Lawrence, but Mac Jones can still throw the ball, and they will probably be losing. I think they'll probably be losing that game against the Vikings. Just as a comeback, if you're stacking Darnold and Jefferson, I think Brian Thomas at 6.6K is kind of interesting. You could even punt with somebody like Parker Washington too, because I believe Christian Kirk is still out. Nothing else really calling to me. I just think those are some interesting values that we can entertain. Not sure if you mentioned Quentin Johnson as part of the Lad McConkey sales pitch, but at 4.9K, he's also in play. Excuse me. George Pickens is kind of popping here against the Commanders. You mentioned something about liking Russell Wilson to a certain degree. How do you feel about Pickens at 6.8K?
I think he looks awesome. If you're going to play anyone with Russ, it's going to be him, presumably. So kind of expensive, but I don't know if he's going to be mega chalk or anything at that salary. Matchup's fine. Washington was a team we were wanting to pick on before the last few weeks. Like I said, I'm still not fully sold on them. So Pickens looks good to me. I think Noah Brown on the other side of that game is an okay value. If you want to play someone with McLaurin, it would be him for me in a Jaden Daniels stack. But I think we've hit on pretty much everyone. Roma Dunze, if you want to play Caleb Williams, I think a Dunze is the natural stacking partner with him.
Yeah, and I think the natural stacking partner with Hurts would be AJ Brown here. Devontae Smith is is fine, but at 7.8K feels like his price is coming up a little bit high.
Questionable, Devontae Smith?
Yeah, he's been limited in practice. I think he's going to play, but I don't know. I just feel like the price tag is a bit high. AJ Brown also was hurt in the last game for Philly, but 8.2K feels a little bit too cheap for him, and he's not going to be owned. All right, moving over to tight end. Leading the way is Trey McBride with a 16-point fantasy projection. Right behind him is George Kittle, and right behind him is Travis Kelce. And actually, right behind him is Cade Otton. So that's the big 4-pack for tight ends. All those guys are coming in with over 15-point fantasy projection, and nobody else has even 14. So they look like the best plays of that group. Who is your favorite?
It's going to be probably Kittle, just because I'm going to play more Purdy than anyone else, I think. But I do have quite a bit of Otton, just like a target machine without Godwin and Evans in there. Baker has to throw to somebody. He's been throwing to Otton. He's still not super pricey. Like 5.5 is okay, I think, for him. Kelsey's fine. McBride is okay, but in that range, I have a lot more interest in Kittle and Otton overall.
Yeah, I think just as far as safety and value goes, Otton feels pretty darn interesting, and he's not going to garner that much ownership. I like that Kelsey is really chalky so far, because that means Kittle might be overlooked to a degree. He's pushing for 10% ownership, so it's not like he's unowned, obviously. But if he's going to be less owned than Kelsey, I like that, and I'm right there with you with the Purdy stack. So I like him quite a bit. I do like Dalton Kincaid at 4.9K. He's the next guy after that group of tight ends who are coming in with 15-point fantasy projection. The Colts do not do well against tight ends, and he had 10 targets last week. He didn't really turn them into anything, but I think in this matchup he could have success. Evan Ingram, I mean, I don't know. I don't really trust Mac Jones. I don't want a ton of exposure to the Jaguars offense, but they'll be trailing, and the Vikings pass defense has given up production. Kind of same story with Jake Ferguson with Cooper Rush in there. Not a good matchup by the numbers against the Eagles, but I mean, Cooper Rush is probably just going to have to do a lot of checkdowns, which might be why Rico Dowdle at 6.1K has a little bit of value, and same with Jake Ferguson here at 5K flat. So if you don't like CD, maybe you can just kind of get those like low just those like little short targets for Ferguson, and then just rack up PPR points that way. One other guy is Hunter Henry at 3.9K. He's popping mostly because of price. I don't know. Are the Bears bad against tight ends? Doesn't really seem like they are, but just price play there, I suppose. Any other values for you?
Will Disley looks like he's going to be pretty chalky for 3-1. No problem with that. He's super cheap. I like the Chargers in general. I think he's a pretty good play, even at ownership. I don't mind it. I think the Henry thing is fine too, just because I think Drake May might be kind of good, and Henry gets targets on that team. Chicago is not an amazing defense, like we saw the Cardinals tear them apart last week. So I don't mind Henry. I don't mind Demario Douglas for that matter either as a punt in that same offense. And then a couple more cheapies. Juwan Johnson for New Orleans I think is okay. Game in a dome, Derek Carr's back, it's fine. And then Zach Ertz as a cheapie for Washington. Typically gets a few targets. Don't mind that either.
Okay, so strategy, approach-wise, are you leaning more towards paying for a tight end or punting?
I think you can play two. I think that's fully in play this week. I think you can play like Otton with Disley, Otton with Juwan Johnson, so-and-so with Hunter Henry. Like two tight ends in the lineup, I think is a pretty good build this week, so I don't mind that at all.
Okay. I think I will probably lean towards paying, and it's probably going to be Kittle. I just think you have four guys who project really well for the position. I mean, most weeks has it not been like, can we even get a 12-point fantasy projection from tight ends? And now
seems like it's gotten better the last several weeks.
Yeah, it has. So I do think there could be it could be a situation where we are sacrificing points for roster building, whereas I think we might need, whether you go too tight or not, I think you might need to go pay for one of those guys. I think Kittle's the guy who stands out for me, but McBride being unowned and Otten being the cheapest of that 4-pack, that is interesting.
There's also kind of a lack of cheap value, especially at running back, like we talked about.
Yeah.
There aren't really punt QBs other than maybe Herbert you feel good about. Even the cheap receivers, like beyond Jawan Jennings, I'm not super confident in anyone.
Right.
So you kind of have to save somewhere, and I think tight end is the most logical place to do it.
Yeah, it just comes down to choosing the right one. Also, you could save at defense, and that's where I tend to try to save. But defense never works out for me, though. No matter what I do, it just doesn't work out. Leading the way with the best projection is Philly going up against Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. Right behind them is Chicago. Chicago at 3K against the Patriots, probably my favorite defense of this slate. But I mean, if I can help it, I want to pay under 3K. I think the Jets at 2.9K against the Cardinals stand out. Patriots at 2.5K just as a pure punt. Anybody else like in the punt range, like at 2.5K or cheaper that you feel good about, or like where are you going with defense this week?
Looks like Chicago is the one I have the most of, followed by New England. A couple of rookie QBs, so I get that. Denver at 2-4. It's not a bad defense. Mahomes has thrown quite a few picks this season. Never know what can happen there. It's not like the Chiefs have been dominant either. Like they looked good last week, but they're not putting up 40 points a week like they were a few years ago. So I don't think Denver, a talented defense at home. I think they're at home, aren't they? Or are they on the road? I think Denver's pretty.
They were at home last week against the Buccaneers. Oh, no, Denver?
This week. Are they at home this week? I don't know.
They're
on the road. But either way, I think they're fine.
Yeah, so here's the thing. The first defense that stood out to me was Chicago, and here they are almost 30% owned. So that's disgusting. So I'm probably going to go away from that.
Good reason to want to play like Hunter Henry also, just kind of going against that ownership.
Exactly. So if you want to get away from, I think the Jets are interesting. I think the Steelers are interesting. And you mentioned the Broncos at 2.4K. Like, go get a good defense that you know has been good and consistent and can get sacks and put pressure on the quarterback and force those turnovers, but they just might not be in a really good spot, right? So the Steelers against the Commanders obviously have been very, very good, but they do have a rookie quarterback, and Pittsburgh does have a good pass rush. You have the Jets against the Cardinals. The Jets, I mean, they've had a couple bad games, but we know what they're capable of doing. And then the Broncos, like you said, are probably the one that stand out the most. They're just so cheap because there's a little bit too much onus being put on the fact that they gave up 41 points to Baltimore last week. So I think that was more of like a blip on the radar. They've been really good the rest of the year.
Agreed.
All right. Before we wrap it up, any major flag plant or strategy to bestow on everybody watching?
I think my favorite kind of contrarian strategy is going to be the 2 tight end thing, like I talked about. And my favorite stack that's not really going to be super popular is going to be the Chargers. I think Disley is going to be popular, but the other pieces in that passing game, including Herbert, are not really looking super owned right now.
Yeah, I think my thing is going to be fading Alvin Kamara first. I think just doing that alone gets me away from what the field is doing. If he's going to be almost 30% owned, probably going to fade the Bears defense as well. Could do something different there. I will pay up at tight end because I feel like there's too many good tight ends at this point to not do that. And then at quarterback, it's probably just Sam Darnold or Brock Purdy, and I'm leaning Brock Purdy and a 49er stack there. The real question is going to be how you stack the 49ers. Because like you said, they have 2 very good value pieces, very good tight end. There's even McCaffrey, and of course there's Debo. So lots to think, how many do you stack, which ones do you stack, that kind of thing. You got to think about that with every stack, I guess. But anyways, that's where I'm at. Hopefully this all helped you in your own process. If it did, give this video a like and also subscribe to the channel so you can catch more videos just like this. Thanks for watching and good luck.